Welcome to the Communication Collaboration. Our guest this time is the veteran. I guess if you want to, you can just start out letting everybody know a little bit about yourself, like what your background is and where you come from, just so they can kind of get into the mindset of where you are.
Almost 50-year-old man, born and raised in Southern California. I won't say that I grew up poor because I never went without a meal. There was always food in the home. Now, was it what I wanted to eat, or was it Tostitos instead of Cheerios? A lot of those things were the case, but we were never without food, and we were never without, water, power, and the things that we needed. The whole lot we wanted for. Grew up in a family with 4 siblings. Mom and Dad were married up until Mom passed back in March, so it was kind of unique amongst my peers because the 70s is probably when divorce started becoming more of a thing. So my parents were kind of amongst the last of a dying breed. There's still a few out there, but they're few and far between.
I should point out, are you talking about the African American community or just in general?
In this particular case, I'm speaking generally.
Okay.
Marriages don't seem to be what they used to be for a variety of reasons, I would say. It's not any one single thing, although I hear people get on their soapboxes and blame it on one simple thing or another, women's feminism or this, that, or the other. There are a lot of contributing factors why marriages don't seem to be the thing that they were. Although the loss in power, or should I say the power vacuum becoming smaller, is definitely a contributing factor, but I don't think that's a bad thing. That power vacuum caused people to stay in bad situations. More bluntly, women to stay in bad situations. With the dissipation of that power vacuum, women were no longer forced to necessarily stay in those bad situations. I'm probably getting off topic. So anyhow, kind of a smart kid, smart enough to know that I was smart, but smart enough to know that I wasn't a genius as well. Locked down some scholarships, moved away to college because I needed some freedom from that structure in my home that I hated as a kid, and immediately got to college and partied my way out. So found myself back at home feeling like a failure with limited opportunities around me. So I was like, I'm going to join the military and go grab some money for college. Supposed to be a one and done, but met a pretty little young lady, had a crumb snatcher, and next thing you know, I was a career guy. So you're speaking to a 26-year Navy veteran who believes the Navy is the best mistake he ever made, but he's also glad to be retired. Guess that's a good background.
So I got to ask you, what do you think about the political climate today versus when you were coming up? I know that problems always existed, and these things aren't new by any means, but it's certainly exaggerated.
I think that's a good word, exaggerated. It's my belief, and I could be wrong. I'm candid enough to recognize I could be wrong, but it's my belief we have grown more selfish as human beings across the board, and that we're seeing that first and foremost in our politics because it's party over everything at this point, or at least that's my perception, and it drives me freaking berserk. I'm as mad as I can be with the Democratic Party, but I'm also as mad as I can be with the Republican Party, and at this point I'm convinced that the two-party system is killing us. And yeah, I know we have an independent thing, but let's face it, unless something really crazy happens, that independent party will only help one side and hurt the other. That's all it ever does, historically.
Yeah, I think it's there really just as cannon fodder, you know what I mean? Just so you can say, hey, we're more than just a two-party system. But if you look at history, there, Republicans and Democrats have always what's been voted, even though they do tend to switch sides occasionally. Where did you grow up as a child?
San Bernardino, California.
San Bernardino, California. California is a very liberal state, correct?
That's what they say. I told one of my friends recently, I said, yeah, they're just more polite about their racism.
You know, I felt that way about the South, too. I mean, where I'm at. I mean, I know you've spent some time here and probably have your own way that you view where I'm at, specifically the California area. So I guess it's safe to assume you've been all over California, not just San Bernardino.
I lived in San Diego for a number of years. Lived in L.A. County, right near the L.A. Fairgrounds. I've never lived in Northern California. Visited on multiple occasions as my older brother used to stay up there in the Bay Area. So I kind of know California reasonably well. But even in liberal California, in my youth, within 30 minutes of my home, there were neighborhoods that I knew that people that looked like me were not welcome and had better be very careful when spending time in those neighborhoods or transiting through. Better be paying attention.
Okay. Now, are those neighborhoods still that way, or is that just because of that moment in time?
It's not as bad.
Yeah.
Not as bad, the areas I'm familiar with. But there's areas near San Diego that still carry their name. There's one place, they call it Planty, which is a riff on its actual name.
So you dealt with the racism there growing up, obviously. What about when you got into the Navy? Was there any racism for you in the Navy?
Yeah, definitely. What I tell young minorities is that the military is one of the best places you can go because you're going to get the fairest shake of the stick out there for the most part. Didn't say it's going to be fair, but there are a lot of systems and checks and balances in place that have improved over time to assist and deal with issues of racism. But as always, you can't legislate the way someone thinks, nor can you really change it. They have to have that moment for themselves. I think in a previous conversation, I told you one thing that I used to tell people towards the end of my career when I was actually working in equal opportunity was I would ask them a question. And I didn't want them to answer. I just wanted them to think about it. I put them in a scenario where their life was on the line, and the person that walked into the room that could save their life was from a group or background that they really didn't identify with or flat out dislike. And I asked them if they cared at that moment that it was a Muslim, or that it was a gay person, or that it was a black person, or whatever. And in that moment, when their life hung in the balance, nobody cared what the individual is that walked into the room that could save their life. All they cared about was, would that individual save their life? And the question begs is, why do we care Monday through Friday when all the chips aren't on the table?
We've disassociated ourselves from each other, I think. A lot of it, I think, maybe has to do with we just can't spot social cues anymore like we used to because we just don't have that face time anymore.
Yeah, that's part of it.
And part of this generation coming up, too. I don't know exactly how they're going to deal when they get to be our age, you know?
Yeah. I'll tell you what gives me hope is that the children of this generation, so if in my age, you were young, it might be half white, you identified black, period. It was just known that, all right? You identified black, you were treated black. In today's day and time, you're considered biracial. And some of the youngsters like, don't put me in a box.
Yeah.
And I like that. Don't put me in a black or white box. I'm me. And why should my skin color or lack thereof matter?
Right.
And that gives me hope.
Well, and I worry about that too, about the death of individualism. I've talked about it a few times on my Facebook page, and you know, I get gruff from people, and they accuse me of being radical and being extreme, and I'm like, you know, the thing about it is why aren't we questioning these things? Why aren't we calling these things to light? You know, why don't we talk to our fellow man about these things and see, you know, how they feel about it? You can't just live in a box, like you said, you know?
Yeah. But if I put things in boxes, they're easier to manipulate.
Yeah, that's a good point, too.
And I don't know if we had this conversation because I'm not sure if I had this revelation before or after we got to do lunch that day. But the thing that came to me in a history class that I was taking was I started looking at the world historically and from different regions of the world. And it dawned on me that from what I could tell throughout recorded history, one group has always marginalized another to maintain, gain, or increase power. And I can't think of a region of the world where that doesn't hold true or a time period.
Why do you think that is, though?
I think at our base and our core nature, we're selfish and greedy. And that troubles me.
That's a harsh truth.
That I shouldn't say troubles me, it saddens me. I'm aware enough to ask myself the question, if I had grown up privileged, would my viewpoints be the same toward minorities? and for the underprivileged groups. And I'm aware enough to recognize that there's a strong chance that I would think that white privilege is a made-up thing, and that minorities are just crying wolf about everything and they're not trying hard enough. I really believe that would be my mindset, because it's hard to understand it unless you really try. And then you have reasons for not wanting to understand it, both conscious and subconscious.
Right.
What person that really values the idea of their self-worth wants to go into a fight knowing that the other individual had handicaps that they didn't have? But the world is what we find it. We change it where we can, we adapt, and we should have conversations. That's the thing that I hate, is that we don't. And both sides are guilty of not willing to have a conversation. They want to have a one-way monologue where their point of view is shoved down your throat.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. Another thing, too, I think a lot with the verbiage. When you use hedge words such as white privilege, and you come to the table and try to talk to people and have an honest conversation, when you use those types of words, it almost feels like you want to come with an argument. And I get what they're saying, but on the same hand, to people who have worked hard all their lives and have gotten something, just it takes away from them.
So I hate the term white privilege, because A, it doesn't even really describe what has occurred, and B, it doesn't even suggest, it says that white people don't work for what they get.
Right, right.
And that is not true. People are just now starting to phrase it properly, but we still have this really piss-poor label. Because I'm starting to see it a lot. White privilege doesn't mean that you didn't work hard. It means that your skin color wasn't one of the things making your work harder. And that's truly, for me, what it was all about, especially what I noticed in the military, is everywhere I went, I had to prove that I deserved the rank I'd earned already. One of the things I seem to see on social media a lot is minorities having to prove that they belong in a place. And I have friends that engage me and say, well, you've done pretty well for yourself. I don't see how, yada, yada, yada. And I tell them, here's my problem. This is my complaint about police brutality and the justice system and all these things. Me driving in a nice car in a nice neighborhood is far more likely to get stopped than you, my white friend, driving in a nice car in a nice neighborhood. And I'm not okay with that, because I want equal treatment under the law. But they're so entrenched in their viewpoint that they don't even want to engage on that. And it usually shifts into a, what about black on black crime, or blacks commit more crimes? And then I engage them again. If you know anything about statistics, you know that you can tell a lie by adding or omitting variables. Yeah, black people are committing more crimes. That's what the data says. But when you do a deep dive on the data, you start seeing the rate at which black people are stopped is how many hundreds of times higher? So then you're going to find more of those criminals. And then when you take a look at the other data, like from the Innocence Project, the number of black people that they've proven were innocent is far greater than any other demographic. So you have to start questioning the narrative, or at least you should.
Right, right.
You really should.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think people get too caught up in the argument itself. A lot of one-sided arguments going on. Most of the arguments I get into, it ends up with some bullshit that, like, you need to do some research or this, that, and the other. And it's like, here's the deal. This is my opinion. When did it not be okay for me to have an opinion? Like, I respect your viewpoint and your opinion and where you come from, but I see things a little bit differently than you do. And
yeah,
I mean, as long as you're not out there hurting yourself or somebody else, I believe that you should be entitled to believe what you believe,
I'll tell you where I have the most problems. When I admit to my military buddies that aren't black that the 4th of July for me just is okay. I can't get all charged up about it the way they do, and I don't. Because I recognize that back when we made that Declaration of Independence, it wasn't for people like me. It wasn't intended for people like me. So how am I supposed to get all giddy when we talk about Independence Day when it wasn't Independence Day for the people that look like me?
For everyone.
And then to add insult to injury, when we did make Independence Day for everybody, we never created a holiday officially to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't every American be happy to celebrate Juneteenth when everybody was free? When according to the actual law, whether or not we practiced it fully, everyone was free on Juneteenth. But why shouldn't every American be proud to celebrate the day that we abolished slavery with a national holiday?
I got to be honest with you there, man. I had never heard of Juneteenth until maybe a couple of months ago when it started becoming a big thing on social media. Like it wasn't taught in school.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't taught to me in school either. I didn't learn until college.
Right.
A lot of stuff wasn't taught, and we can get on another one of my things that irritates me when everybody cries about erasing history.
Oh yeah.
How about we go back and just tell history more accurately?
Yeah, I agree with you there. that would be a good starting point anyway. History is one of those things that are ever changing anyway, depending on who's telling the story.
Exactly.
It all depends on what your narrative is, I guess, at that time point.
Yeah.
And if you weren't there, then you have nothing to put into it anyway, because you're an observer just like I am.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
I don't get that.
Yeah, but my opinions, I've lost a few Facebook friends. I've only unfriended one person.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
That person said something overtly racist when we were having, I think, a discussion about police brutality against black folks or whatever. And of course, it always devolves into black on black crime. And this individual's comment was, black people killing other black people almost make this miserable world worthwhile.
Oh, shit.
That was a bridge too far.
Yeah, man.
This from a man who called me on my honeymoon and dumped a bunch of his marital problems in my lap for me to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was he calling me, his wife was calling me, his mama was calling me on my honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how you feel about people that look like me.
Mm-hmm.
Check. Goodbye.
I was going to ask, too, because I see some of your friends post, and it seems like... I know that you guys joke amongst each other and such and whatnot, but from the outside looking in and not knowing the complete story, I would almost think that you had a couple of racist friends because of some of their remarks or their inability to see that you're both arguing two sides of the same coin.
Racism is another term that I think gets used too much. I know very few card-carrying racists. I know a lot of people who carry biases that they don't want to explore. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And let me put a finer point on that. When you and I and your wife and my wife had got together and had lunch, you were telling me about a story, and I was trying to remember exactly how you told it, about an African-American man in a bad neighborhood at night. You yourself would be worried about that on a stereotypical level. Do you remember telling me that story? Am I even close to what you were saying?
I'm not sure what story I told you, but in the last several years, one of the realizations I had, and I tell it to my wife all the time, and sometimes I use words I shouldn't use, but I told her, everybody hates black people, even black people.
Mm.
And I said, I see it in me. And if I have to watch myself, if I have to literally police myself so that I don't treat people that look like me as though they have less value than others, how much more do I have to watch people that don't look like me?
Mm.
And I've caught myself doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing that hurts you. It's like, how many years or how many ways and how many years did they have to subconsciously program me to hate what I am, to fear it, to be biased against it in a negative light? They had a lot of years. But when I realized I'm a smart dude, in my mind, like I said, I'm not a genius, but I'm smarter than the average bear. And it took me a long time to realize that I've been programmed to treat people that look like me as less than anyone else just because they presented. Not in how they presented themselves, but just because they presented. I know nothing about them. They're in front of me, but they're less than. And that has been a learning curve to unprogram myself. My older brother and I had the same discussion, and he said he had a situation where somebody pointed it out to him. He was out at night, he was sitting in his car somewhere, and he saw a black man walking down the street, and he locked his doors. And, the doors make a nice little clunk.
Right.
And when the black man got level with his car, he said to him, brother, I was never going to do you harm.
Hmm.
But that's the first thing. We've all drank from the poison well. Now, the question is, how many of us are willing to open our eyes and acknowledge it and do better? So when I'm really having a Zen day, even when I run across one of those people who has a whole bunch of bias that they haven't explored, I try to make sure it's a teachable moment versus a moment where I get caught up in my anger and, how long do I have to accept this expectation of second-class citizenship? Because I have to remind myself, I drank from that same poison well too.
Hmm.
And it impacts how I treat people if I don't watch myself. And who says I'm always
Right.
good police? Some days I might not be on top of my job.
It's always so interesting for me hearing people who grew up and come from, in your instance, California, but people I talk to from the north as well. My father's side of the family is from the north, and even friends that I have now who live in the north, and they were talking about when this Black Lives Matter first started kicking up, and they started having more rallies and protests. And I was talking to another African American friend of mine who lives up north, and he was like, it's crazy up here. There's a whole bunch of rioting and looting, and nobody knows really what's going on. They're like, what's going on where you're at? Because they know, you don't get too much further south than, I mean, you could go to South Florida, but everybody knows the more south you go, the more north you are in Florida. But from where I am, you can't get very much more south. And I had to laugh about it and say, the extent of our racism is we had a Black Lives Matter movement here where a white man was run over by another white man and carried across the 3-mile bridge, where he was escorted off the car and arrested. And now he's being sued for messing up the white man's car while he's driving him across the bridge. So my point is even here in the South, I guess, like I said, it's always been kind of subtle, but I haven't really noticed a lot of racism. And a lot of people would say, well, you're white, you wouldn't. And I can agree with that to a certain extent, but I mean, at some point it's going to be blatantly obvious. I don't have the stories that you have, and it shocks me that I grew up in the South and I don't have those stories, where you grew up in a fairly liberal place, and you've probably got worse stories than I do.
It's interesting. A lot of times you don't see a thing for what it is because you haven't really been taught to.
Mm-hmm.
And then perspective is everything. I think I shared with you the story about buying jewelry at the Navy Exchange and not being helped in the order I should have been, and that the person actually acknowledging that they did it and coming to them as a shock that they had treated me that way. So they didn't realize it. That was their default setting.
Mm-hmm.
Just like my default setting, I know what it is, so I have to watch me so that I don't let my default setting drive me around.
Right.
We all have these default settings based off of where we grew up and how we grew up and the things that we experienced. But a lot of folks just don't want to have that conversation, and they really don't want to take that critical look in the mirror. So it's difficult. It wasn't fun when I learned how sexist I was, but I really didn't think I was sexist.
Right.
I mean, I would have denied it with my last breath.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to that equal opportunity school and the mirror was shown to me, and man, I fought it long and hard, but I had to own it in the end because it was what it was. I had a lot of those sexist micro behaviors that minimized and diminished the contributions that women make to the world.
But like you said, realizing that and correcting that is where it's all about. But if you're not even willing to do that, then you can't even have a conversation about it,
Yeah, who wants to look in the mirror and own that? Because sexism is an ugly word, just like racism.
Yeah.
What person that, kind of likes what they see in the mirror wants to actually own that that's in the mirror too?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very difficult task for a lot of people.
Yeah.
My friends that always go on the, well, what about the black-on-black crime? I said, okay, let's talk about that. The police problem isn't important. It's the black-on-black crime. I said, well, for me, my concern is this. So I safely navigate all of those issues and challenges in my poor black neighborhood, and then I get killed by the police for jaywalking,
Right.
something that everybody's doing. But see, I figured out how to navigate all of those challenges in the poor black neighborhood. The one thing that I shouldn't have to worry about is that the people that swear an oath and that are paid taxpayer dollars shouldn't have to worry about them upholding the law.
Right.
Shouldn't have to worry about them brutalizing me.
And again, that's one of those things that's probably always been a problem in your life. It's not something that just started recently.
Yeah. I made up my mind that the next time I get stopped for a traffic stop for whatever reason, and I get asked if the vehicle that I'm in, that I presented registration that's in my name, that I presented a valid driver's license with my name that matches the registration, and that I still get asked if this is my vehicle, I'm going to say that I don't understand the question. And I'm going to take my chances with that one. I'm sorry, officer, I don't understand the question. And then I'm going to use that to lead us into a conversation about why are you asking me a question to which you already have the answer via valid document.
So how many times, just guesstimation, do you think you've been asked that question?
I don't know because I wasn't counting. One of the last times I got pulled over, not the last time, but the time before that I actually got pulled over and interacted with an officer and received a ticket because I made a right turn on a red light from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on the weekend. Normally those signs say Monday through Friday, no right turn from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. But in this particular neighborhood, it's just no right turn, period, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I made that right turn on red, got pulled over by an officer, and he's looking at all of my appropriate documentation, and he asked me if that's my vehicle. And it was a pretty nice vehicle. Now I have an even nicer truck, and I'm waiting for that to happen. Oh, here's another one, though. So most of the folks in my neighborhood know a little bit about me because my very next door neighbor is the neighborhood watch. And I mean that playfully. His favorite pastime is to sit in his garage and just watch everything that's going on, socialize with everybody coming and going. So I'm under the assumption that most people know I'm retired Navy and I don't really work. I drive Uber from time to time.
Right.
So when I brought home my $70,000 truck, one of the other people in the neighborhood asked my neighbor, how could I afford that truck? Why is it that your expectation is that I can't have nice things?
Now, for clarification, was this another fellow African American or was it a white man?
I'm assuming it was someone white. There's a handful of black people in my neighborhood, but not a lot.
Okay.
I don't know, to be honest with you, though. But we all have that same default setting, remember?
Yeah. Well, and I guess specifically what I was trying to get at is these are probably people that you have talked to and that do know you, just probably don't know you extensively, or is that incorrect to assume that?
So I don't talk a lot with the folks in the neighborhood. I do chat it up with the guys that live right next door to us. I'll say that we chat it up periodically, but everybody else I just kind of wait. So they wouldn't know my circumstances or anything. But the question was, how can you afford that nice truck? So we live in a townhouse community. So there's a garage, parking space in front of the garage. There's open parking directly across, and then there's a lot of parking kind of around back, or more parking. So my other truck, my silver truck that you've seen, was actually around back. So when my neighbor told me that the person was asking him, well, how can he afford that truck? When I saw a spot open up directly across from my place, I ran to the back to go get my silver truck to park it there too, to make sure that they knew I had both my trucks.
Isn't that a bit passive aggressive though?
Yeah, it was passive aggressive. So I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I'm too old to be a freedom fighter or an activist. I shouldn't say that I'm too old. I want to use my remaining years to enjoy them. And activism is hard work. I'm a little selfish, but I'm definitely living my life in alignment with those principles. So my wife and I travel a fair amount. We can't afford to fly first class all the time, but we can afford to get it in here and there. And when we do, you know what I do? I wear Walmart sweatsuit. I wear nondescript shoes. Literally, they're not even Nike. They're not Adidas. They don't have any markings on them. Don't wear any jewelry. And I sit in first class and let people just look at me and wonder. And I want to impact everybody, not just white people. I want black people to look at me too and think, I know he's not a rapper. Could be a football player, but he don't have no jewelry. Not an actor. Well, if he can figure out a way to afford to fly first class, so can I.
Yeah.
I want to challenge the mindset and the mind state. And it didn't become important to me until my wife and I and her girlfriend and her mom, we did a Vegas trip. And one of the things, so we lost TSA pre-check when we got out, when we retired from the Navy, right?
Right.
So the first time we flew somewhere and didn't have TSA pre-check, I was like, oh, hell to the no. We need TSA pre-check. So while we're getting TSA pre-check, we found out about this thing called Clear. Now, Clear isn't at all the airports, but it's at a lot of the major ones. Clear, you walk up to a kiosk, meet an agent, you do a fingerprint scan or a retinal scan, and they escort you to the TSA agent. Not to the line, but to the agent. So you don't even have to have your ID card out anymore or anything.
Wow.
So we're coming back home from Vegas, and the TSA agent sees us coming with the Clear agent, and he puts his hand up in a stop sign to the next person in line that was going to come up. And when that gentleman looked around and saw that he had to wait for 4 black people, and the look on his face said that he didn't think of us as 4 black people.
Yeah.
Man, was he living. He was up. It wrecked his world. And if I'm being honest, after seeing that, I wasn't thinking anything about it until I saw that it wrecked his world. And I'll have to be honest with you, it gave me pleasure to see his world wrecked like that.
Yeah.
Because his expectation is that he should never have to wait on people that look like me.
Yeah.
It was obvious.
Right. Yeah, I agree. You can read those types of things.
We've got to stop assuming that people have values without knowing anything about them.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're assigning value to people. All of us as human beings are assigning value to people without knowing anything about them. But my goal is to constantly give people a learning experience.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that you've gotten too old for that now, man. You just sit back and do the thing. And this is part of the reason why I think groups like Black Lives Matter or any of your groups like this generally fail is because of appeasement, I believe, in my opinion. And I think that my parents' generation were the great offenders. Here you have a bunch of peace-loving hippies, free love movement, and a great cause to get behind. And it seems like only a few things were changed, and here we are, 40, 50 years later, and we're fighting the same struggles that they fought because I think they got to a point where they were appeased enough and they kind of lost their way and then kind of traded the hippie stuff in for suits and just got to a point where, we're too old, the next generation will take care of it, the next generation will take care of it. I don't think we're ever really going to get anywhere if we keep doing that. I see that nowadays they are starting to get more stuff going, but I'm afraid that, like when we talk about the statues and stuff like this, I mean, honestly, take them down, leave them up. I don't care one way or another, but these are small things, when you talk about, because I don't care who you are. If you're black, white, racist, non-racist, if you watch that video of George Floyd, that shit straight up murder, man. And no one in their right mind could deny that. You know what I mean?
I've seen a few try to deny it. I couldn't watch the video.
Yeah.
Because I shouldn't say I couldn't. I wouldn't let myself. Over the course of my life, I feel that I've ingested enough poison, because that's what I see that video as. I'm glad that they captured it. I'm glad that it got out there. But I don't want to get to a point where I've ingested so much poison that now I'm just bitter. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh, no. I understand completely. I went through that after I watched that video because because my whole thing was like, that's messed up, just being a human being watching that like that. There's no reason it should have went that far. And then you've got the other side saying, yeah, the rioters, and they're looting and this, that, and the other. And people got mad at me because I said, look, I understand what they're doing. I don't necessarily agree with it because I think it hurts the cause, but I understand what they're doing. And to be completely honest with you, man, if that was my kinfolk laying on the ground like that, riots would be the least of your concern. I would be cutting throats and moving, brother. Let me tell you.
Riots would be the least of your concern.
Yeah.
It would be a more directed approach.
Yeah.
Somebody brought back the conversation that started in California. I think it was 2013, And I'm hoping my raggedy memory won't fail me and I can remember the officer's name. He went on the killing spree.
Mm.
He went on a killing spree of other officers because he was LA County PD, and he filed a complaint against a female officer who he'd witnessed do multiple bad things. And some of it appeared to be racially motivated as well. And they basically did nothing to her and ran him out of his job.
Hmm.
And he wrote a manifesto and then posted it online and nobody saw it.
Hmm.
And then he killed like a high LA police official's kid, a couple other officers. I want to say he ambushed some officers, and he had the police in Southern California terrified. They were so terrified they shot up a car with 2 women in it, thinking it was him or afraid it was him. But he posted a complete manifesto of all the stuff that he'd seen done and how he thought he was going to become a police officer to change the system or, affect some change. And this is what they did to him as well. And somebody brought that back. That's why those kinds of things happen. For me, just seeing the picture and the look on his face, I can't tell you what he was thinking, but I can sure guess. And I believe my guess will be very accurate. I can do this and nobody will stop me and nothing will happen to me after it's done. That was the look that I read on his face. And I truly believe that he believed it. You've got to think about why would he believe such a thing? That I can do this in broad daylight with you filming me, and I believe down in my core that nothing bad will happen to me. The system is broke when an officer thinks that.
Yeah, the thing is I think the system has been broke for a long time. The one thing I have to back that up is that anytime there's any kind of problem, the police do anything wrong, and they're investigated, who investigates them? The police.
Exactly.
How can you effectively investigate your own people?
Yeah, how can you objectively?
Right.
No organization should get to investigate their own misconduct.
Well, Fort Hood's, I think, starting to figure that stuff out right now. I know that they had called for a third-party investigator to come in there.
Well, at this point, Fort Hood is so toxic, nobody even wants that case to begin with. Yeah. Within the Army. But the system has been that way a long time, and it's broken. I don't know what's going to fix it because I don't think the people truly have the power to revolt. And I don't know if you and I had the conversation, but I know I came to the realization that if any marginalized group, especially Black people, African Americans, because we are consumers, if we could band together long enough and stop consuming, we wouldn't have to beg for a seat at the table. We wouldn't have to beg for changes in policy and how policy is executed. They would build a freaking table and beg us to come to it because we are the number one consumers in this country.
It's an interesting point there.
All we have to do is stop consuming because at the end of the day, money drives everything. If we could realize that. It absolutely does. You wouldn't need to march. You wouldn't need to protest. You wouldn't need to nothing if we could just stop consuming. Figure out how to take our dollars every payday. I'm only paying the barest necessity of bills, and the rest of my money I'm pulling it out of the freaking system.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, which takes me to the Black Wall Street thing. I believe that may have already been done once in history, and was toppled. Correct?
Yes. So that has been done, but that was a much smaller scale. It's still, and now here's the thing. Everybody can get behind in 2020 the fact that ugly, I hate this group because they're whatever color, racism has no place in our society. Pretty much the whole world can get behind that. So that kind of treatment, that kind of blatant attack, that won't work. You know what I mean?
Right.
The world won't stand for another Black Wall Street, and there's no way you can keep it a secret. I saw a suggestion that makes police unions start settling the wrongful death suits out of the police retirement fund. Man,
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to change a single law.
Yeah.
Make them accountable. You know, I will say that we've gotten better. Officers are being held accountable far more often than they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, of course, my friends, well, they still, you know, it happens to everybody. I said, yeah. But I said, let me tell you something. If black people were winning the lottery way more than white people, and you know there's less black people than white people, and all things being considered, we play the lottery equally, you would say something's wrong. And you wouldn't want to hear if I say, well, see, here's this white guy over here. He won the lottery.
Right.
I
right.
said,
It
think
doesn't
about
fit
that
their
in
narrative.
reverse terms.
Right. Right.
Black people in this nation are winning the reverse lottery on a daily basis at a crazy ratio. And you're telling me that nothing's broken. And I'm just not willing to buy it.
Do you agree with the Black Lives Matter movement and with what's going on out there right now?
I agree with the concept. My problem with Black Lives Matter, personally, is that I don't think they do enough to protect their brand and prevent people from stealing the message. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And that's my big concern. My nephew actually went out and did some protesting. Now, I don't know if it was a Black Lives Matter protest that he went to in Northern California. And I told him, I said, the only way I could protest right now is if I was on the Security Planning Committee. Because I want to know what are the measures that we are taking to ensure that our protest is our protest. Because I can't be convinced that knuckleheads from the far right and the far left in equal numbers aren't showing up and wreaking havoc.
Yeah, man, that's an interesting point. I didn't even think about that.
I can't be convinced that far right and far left have not been taking advantage of these protests to do what they want to do, to further their own agendas,
right.
to further their divisiveness. And hey, let me go even one further out for you, kind of along the same line. So, in my opinion, the Republican Party has run pretty hard with the ball to the right in the last 3 years. And my true fear, while I do not want to see President Trump in office again, is that when the Democrats get the office, they're going to run just as hard, if not harder, in the opposite direction. And that scares me just as much. Because I feel I should be allowed to have an opinion about homosexuality. What I shouldn't be allowed to do is tell someone how to live their life.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
But I feel like we're being told that we have to endorse things that we don't believe in. And if we're not being told that now, I think that when the left gets the ball, that's how far they're going to run with it or try to run with it. I'm trying to convince my wife that we should be looking for another country to live in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's been going on. I worry, part of what I was talking about on one of my last posts, you know, again, I got a lot of flack about it because everybody's like, oh, you're extreme, man, and hearing this stuff again, you know, it's like, it doesn't take a very wise man to see that if Trump gets elected, that we've got another 4 years of what exactly is going on right now. If Biden gets elected, do you think the Republicans are just going to let that shit go? You think they're going to be like, that you gave us for 4 years, that was a good razzing, you know? I don't even think Trump has the ability to stand down if he had to. That's what really scares me.
He might not. You know, I'd never considered that, but that's a good point. The best description I've heard is both parties are like toxic parents fighting over the kid while destroying the kid. And that's truly where I see the state of our politics. I'd be hard-pressed to tell you of anybody that's actually active in politics that truly holds my respect or support, and that's on either side of the fence. I'm so over it. I'm so angry. I wish there was a reset button.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know how we can stop this train. Your post about a war is coming and we can't avoid it, or words to that effect.
Right.
I don't want to misquote you.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, get your stuff and yourself together.
Yeah, that really struck a chord in me as recognizing it as, man, this is probably the truth.
Yeah.
This is probably the truth. And there's not going to be any winners.
No, there isn't. That's the
problem. There's not going to be any winners. You know, one of my black friends was talking about a race war is coming. I said, I sure as shit hope not.
Mm.
I got too many white people in my life I love, family and friends.
I don't think it's so much a race war issue, because the thing about it is we can still rally together in a crisis. I mean, even if you look at the pictures, there's white and black people commingling. I mean, if I just saw predominantly one race, I would be a little bit more worried about it. I think more of a revolution is coming, because I think the old guard is starting to lose their grip, and they realize that. And it's hard to lose power and money. You know what I mean? Because like you said, that's what turns the world. I think it's going to be and again, it's my personal opinion, and all of my friends and everything are like, you know, I don't know what he's talking about, but the thing about it is I hate when I'm right, and I have been right quite a few times in the past.
So for me, in my head, I don't know how a revolution could be successful other than the elite cyber warriors making it happen.
It wouldn't be successful. That's the problem. It would just be more destruction.
Okay. All right. I'm down with that. Yeah, it wouldn't be successful. No, I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how we get a reset. I think people have gotten terminally selfish and greedy. And I feel like we're Rome right before the fall.
Yeah.
And what did Rome in was literally all the politicians love themselves far more than they love their nation. You know, historically, politicians and rulers everywhere have always taken privileges. But it's when they just start doing nothing but take privilege, when they start is the beginning of the end for that society being on top.
And the messed up thing is, I think most people would concede that they wouldn't mind you taking a little bit of privilege if you actually did a good job.
Yeah.
You know, almost like a reward for you've done a great job, you know, thank you, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, a little bit of privilege is all right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But damn it, don't steal 90% of the freaking proceeds, you know?
Yeah. And that goes back to what you said too, the branding, man. Who's involved in that? Who gets a piece of that pie?
Yeah.
Where have you left a back door unlocked?
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you were right about you put a thought in my head too, like, yeah, that's exactly some of this stuff that you're watching on the news going, now why would they do that? And yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's not them, it's somebody else that's just making them look bad, you know?
Yeah. I would love to see things different, and I'm not smart enough to figure out how we slow this train down or how we turn it and change course. I really don't know how we do it, which is why I'm not kidding when I say I've been trying to convince my wife that we could have a nice, comfortable life somewhere else, away from all this turmoil.
Yeah.
Because that's what I see. I see lots of turmoil. And then my older brother and I talk about it a lot. You know, part of me thinks that, well, maybe it won't be too bad, you know, before I kick the bucket, but my son's going to have it fucking rough.
Yeah.
You know, and I told my brother, like, I feel a little bit guilty because I don't have any solutions for him.
Yeah.
You know, but I suspect that he's going to live through some true craziness. And my dad keeps telling me, I'll be out of here before it gets crazy, but you got real crazy coming.
I think about it because my youngest is 2 right now, so it's like, man, if it's this bad right now, what's it gonna be like when she's my age?
Yeah, you won't even be allowed to have a thought that doesn't agree with the collective.
Yeah,
because they're monitoring your thought.
Yeah, and
no,
shit's getting crazy. You're right about that, man. Like I wouldn't put it past him. You know what I mean?
You know, Elon Musk is trying to develop a chip that you implant into a brain, and you can just surf the internet from your brain.
Yeah, I've heard about a few different chip and
are you freaking kidding me? Yeah. Hell to the no! How do I know that you won't figure out a way to hack me?
Yeah, and what's even worse is, I talk to conspiracy theorists all the time, and they're talking about these vaccines and putting chips in those, and when you go to get COVID tested, that's what they're doing. That's why they swab that upper nasal cavity because that's where the bone's the thinnest. And some of these things are just so off the wall. You're like,
what do you think about 5G's killing us all?
yeah, but these are the same people who are talking about not wearing a mask because it goes against their freedom. It's like, well, it seems like you'd want to wear a mask because now they've got that facial recognition software. This is a free out for you, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's a win. Who'd ever thought you'd have to wear a mask to go into a bank?
Yeah.
Who would ever thought you'd have to wear a mask to go into a bank? It's just crazy.
And
crazy,
the thing
crazy.
is I have so I have gotten a bit of a disconnect myself. I don't know if you know this, but I've quit my job and I'm pretty much a homebody now. My wife works from home, and of course, with everything going on with the coronavirus, my kids will be home too. So we don't really go anywhere or do anything, save for every now and again I might, meet up with one of my friends and, shoot the shit with them just for a little bit of mental clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So when all this went down and started happening, of course, I live out in the country now, moved out to the country, and, I guess got to be what you would consider maybe a prepper. I'm not really a doomsday theorist guy. I know I sound kind of like a fatalist, but I'm not. I live on the air of caution that's better to be prepared.
Yeah.
But when all this stuff started happening, I was visiting one of my friends in the city, and he's freaking out, man. He's like, I don't even have a gun, man. Like, I can't get toilet paper. Everything's shut down. And I'm like, calm down, man. It's okay. And he said to me, he goes, well, of course you're not worried about it. You live out there in the country. You hunt, you garden and do your own vegetable stuff. I got a well out back of my house. I don't even need water if But this is the same guy that laughed at me, who was like, I don't know why you want to learn to hunt, man. Why are you gardening? Why you want to move out to the country? What's the big deal with the well? And it's like, just don't worry about the same stuff that you worry about now.
Yeah. So when I was in Guam, I really started wishing that I had learned to hunt.
Yeah.
And actually, even before that, I kind of started. I did a tour in Bahrain, and I started eating a lot more meats and things that weren't, injected full of hormones and this and that and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking to myself, man, if you knew how to hunt, you could eat. You could do this back home too, and cut down on just all the things that you're putting in your body that you don't even know what they are anymore.
Right.
And it seems like with every passing year, I'm truly wishing that I had grown up in the South. Dude, I can't be a part of the process that turns the chicken into my food. I can't pluck it, gut it, and all that stuff. I don't have the constitution for it. All I can do is freaking clean fish.
Yeah.
I can do that one without freaking losing sauce and everything. And I feel like I'm too old to learn.
Yeah.
And me and blood aren't really good anyway. We really aren't. Me and seeing blood pumping out of something, I don't do that well.
Yeah.
But I hate that I don't. But I have started prepping a little bit. Coronavirus started going down and people started showing their ass. I started buying more bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a whole lot of bullets.
Yeah, and I talk to my wife. We have front porch talks all the time because I'll step out and smoke my cigarettes and have a cold drink and just kind of get on YouTube and see what's going on. I don't watch news. I don't watch. I can't tell you the last time I actually watched TV. But it's like I'm not worried about the virus so much. I'm worried about the people.
Yeah. I'm more worried about the people.
Half of surviving any situation is surviving after the situation, because now you've got a bunch of crazy, hungry, freaked out people. It's like trying to get off of a plane that's crashed and everyone survived. Well, not everyone's going to get off,
Exactly. We haven't become preppers yet, but actually we're probably going to be in Florida before the end of next year, just so you know.
Cool. I'd like to get up with you. Yeah.
As soon as she can locate employment down there, because we don't want to be completely unemployed, and I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing for my extra money.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on somebody's punching the clock.
Yeah.
I'm going to be an Uber driver in Florida. So as soon as she figures out what she's going to do for her extra money, we're headed that way. Probably going to be in Central Florida. We're looking at Sebring, Avon Park, Lake Placid. But, yeah, we're headed there. And the goal is to get between an acre and 2 acres of land and build a house.
Yeah, a lot of sinkholes in that area.
Yeah, we do have to watch out for that. She was telling me that.
Yeah. It's probably, the Big Bend area, that central area is probably the best part to be in. Like I said, you go too far north, I think you kind of lose something there. And too far south, it's no good either. I mean, time will tell. Maybe the future will change stuff, but Florida's just a real funny state. It really is. I kind of feel like sometimes I'm judged solely on the principle that I'm from Florida. Where are you from, Florida? Oh, shit, I'm sorry, man. No, that's good, man. You can tell a Floridian, though. I tell my wife all the time, it's like anytime I've ever watched the news and something happened and they have people on there doing like interviews and stuff, it's like someone will get on, it's like, yeah, that joker's from Florida. Someone else will get on, yeah, he's from Florida. And then someone else will get on and be like, that guy's not from here. I can spot that a mile away. They have their own air to them, man, you know? Well, is there anything specifically that you want to put out there, a message to people that are going to be listening that, you know, if it was your last day on earth, what would you impart to everyone?
I wish people knew how to agree to disagree. Allow me to have my perspective. I'm going to allow you to have yours. Like I said, the 4th of July is a big one. Most of my military friends do not want to validate my position. Even when I tell them, I understand why you like the holiday as much as you do and why it fills your heart with joy and passion. It just doesn't for me. Like, I can't get all emotionally involved when reading the Declaration of Independence. It is a beautiful document. I saw you had posted the preamble and the whole thing and all of that.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes.
But once again, I can't feel it the way that others can because I can't escape the fact that it wasn't meant for me.
I get that completely, but the people that you're talking about specifically, do you think it's one of those things that it's not so much that it doesn't mean the same to you as it does to me, is that they're more along the lines of, well, you're just not American. You know, it was like the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, and everybody was like, oh my God, he's disrespecting veterans and the flag. And I'm like, no, he's really not. I haven't seen him kick or spit on any veterans, which you guys did when the Vietnam veterans come back. I haven't seen him burn a flag. And here's the thing. I don't know how you feel about it, but when I joined the service and I was in the Navy, I had a sense of pride that what I was doing ensured his right to do that if he wanted to, or not do it if he didn't want to.
To me, that's what it's about. The right to do it without persecution if you want to or not.
Right. That's the point of a free country, right?
Yeah.
You can do that?
And for me, what was impactful about what he did is I believe that he knew it would cost him his career. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he was truly dumb enough to think he could do that and it wasn't going to cost him his career. Because when he first started doing it, I said, man, if he don't have a great season, he's done.
Yeah.
Because a great season, once again, what rules everything? Money.
Yeah.
So if he'd had a great season, they take that one on the team. But no great season, I'm like, he's done.
I know he had a little bit of a following, but do you think if he had a bigger following behind him, something would have come about? I mean, because even now, when you fast forward a few years and we're in full on tilt, and even that doesn't mean what it did then. You know what I mean? Like, you still hear about Colin Kaepernick, but it's like they're not on his dick anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, that's something different. Now we're talking about this, you know?
If he'd had a big enough following to impact dollars. I'm telling you, at the end of the day, money rules it all. And if you can touch the money,
yeah,
you can change the problem. If you can touch the money, you can affect change in whatever way you need to, but you have to hit the pocket. If you can hit the pockets, you can change behavior.
Well,
it's that simple.
Again, I know that to be true because anytime my pockets were ever touched, I corrected what I was doing pretty quick.
Yeah, if you can touch the money, you can affect change. I think the thing that pissed me off the most this year was the party that's supposed to be about capitalism and free capitalism, free trade, and all this stuff pulled a socialistic move with our tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, because instead of bailing out corporations, they should have bailed out the people. Because the way capitalism is supposed to work is you provide me a service or good that I find of value, and I pay you for it. So if they had given the money to us, the consumers, we would have spent it on the things that we found value in. And if we didn't find value in it, well, guess what? You have a poor business model.
Right.
Because you're supposed to fail if you're not providing us value. But we bailed all these companies out with taxpayer dollars, and then they still turned around and laid people off.
Yeah. I mean, that's a slap in the face, too.
It still gave CEOs bonuses.
Yeah.
And I'm so over that, man. I'm so angry about that.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, man.
The system is rigged to keep the working man a working man.
Well, and that's what they say: the rich get rich and the poor stay poor.
Yeah.
Do you think there's really a system in place that keeps people of your color down, or do you think it's an internal thing? I was watching a debate earlier this week, and I know it had T.I. in it. I forget who else was there, but the lady who was speaking was talking about how fathers being present in the home nowadays is a lot less. There's a lot less of it than it was back then. Do you think that that's an issue? Is it something that a trap that has in fact been set for you guys, or is it something that you do to yourself?
So some of both. It's multi-layered. But here's the thing: anything bad affects poor people worse than everybody else. Because they don't have the resources to deal with it. They're barely surviving as it is, right?
Right.
So anything bad affects poor people worse, who have traditionally been the poorest group of people in this country. So anything bad impacts us harder. Is everything specifically targeted at us? No, because part of it's about keeping control. And if I can make poor white people view poor black people as their enemy, or just black people in general, I can keep that division going, which keeps that group from ever uniting and looking up to seeing what's really going on. Does that make sense?